October, the most fearsome Vias on the planet gather at Mount Panorama for Australia's greatest race. But lurking on the grid is an imposter. A six-cylinder car so advanced, so brutally effective, it didn't just challenge the establishment, it humiliated it. Its victory was so shocking, so threatening to the global automotive order, that powerful forces conspired to erase it from history. This is the story of the engine they couldn't kill, the drivers who loved it, and the conspiracy to silence the greatest six-cylinder ever built, the underdog's gamble. To understand the revolution, you must understand the desperation. Why Chrysler Australia was the underdog. Holden and Ford were national icons, battling with homegrown VS. Chrysler. They were still using the venerable but ancient slant, a tough but uninspiring engine from the Yes America. They were losing badly. But in a small engineering office at Chrysler's Tonsley Park plant in Adelaide, a quiet genius named Maurice Maury Harkis was already plotting a revolution. His brief, create an engine that could take on the Versas but be cheaper to produce and run. His canvas, a discarded American truck engine prototype. His inspiration, the legendary Hemi, but this wouldn't be a copy. This was an evolution. Harkis and his team, including key figures like engineer John Westlake, adapted the hemispherical combustion chamber design. It's not a full Hemi, but a semi-Hemi or polyspherical design. This allowed for larger valves and better airflow than any conventional head. It was a masterpiece of efficiency and power. They called it the Hemi, the first iteration. The C-in was a success, but the battlefield was shifting. Ford unleashed the phase GTHO of Ibiist. Chrysler needed a bigger gun. They boarded the block out to Cubic and L, and for the new sleek Valiant Charger RT, they turned the wick up. But it wasn't enough. They needed a weapon. Let's go back to a new challenger rolled onto Australian soil, the Valiant. Born in America, it crossed the Pacific to face off against the Ford Falcon, a rival that had already won the hearts of locals. At first, the Valiant was an outsider, a Chrysler in name, but entirely American in components. But everything changed. The Apsaries emerged. Not just another import, but Chrysler's first car truly forged in Australia. With unique revisions and a spirit all its own, it broke free from its Plymouth roots and carved a new identity. This was more than a car. This was the moment Chrysler stopped being a guest and became part of Australia's automotive legend, yet beneath the hood. The Australian Valiant carried the Cubic-in slant, the very same engine that powered its Plymouth cousin in the United States. Slanted at humble in appearance, but renowned for its toughness and reliability. For years, the venerable American inline continued to power the complete range of the Australian Valiant. But a storm was brewing. Australia's automotive landscape had become a brutal arena of horsepower and national pride. The Big Three, Ford, Holden, and Chrysler, were locked in a fierce battle for supremacy on the streets and tracks. Ford's Falcon GTS, with their snarling Windsor-dominated headlines, while Holden's monos flexed GM-backed muscle. Chrysler Australia. They were the scrappy outsiders. Their lineup anchored by the aging. Slant a reliable but uninspiring inline that could unkeep pace in the escalating performance wars. Sales were slipping, dealers were grumbling, and the brand's image was fading into irrelevance. But Chrysler Australia refused to bow out. In response, they unveiled a new power plant, one that would carry a name destined for legend, the Hemi. The new Hemi foundation was based on an ILL-fated, lightweight inline prototype. A truck engine conceived years earlier in the United States and quietly abandoned. But what Detroit had discarded, Australia would resurrect. Behind its rebirth stood a small, determined five-man team led by engineer Maurice Harkis. Together, they would transform a forgotten experiment into an engine that would shake the foundations of Australian motorsport. By adapting semi-hemispherical combustion chambers, instead of the fully Hemi ones used on the iconic VIN, the US, they reimagined the design for a straight six. The result wasn't a copy of the legend, but an evolution of it. The hemispherical heads opened the door to larger valves and superior airflow, delivering cleaner, more explosive combustion without the bulk of a valvular alongside the slant for several months, then replacing it altogether. The first arrival was the Cubic and Hemi, cast in iron with thin-walled blocks for lighter weight. Built with 7 main bearings for rock-solid durability. and sporting a non-cross-flow head with intake and exhaust ports on the same side, it was compact, tough, and efficient. Fed by a modest single-barrel carburetor, it was no fear-of-breathing monster. With horsepower, it offered more than the old slant, along with improved fuel economy. It wasn't built to dominate racetracks, but to serve as a dependable workhorse. The new standard heartbeat of the Valiant, alongside the base. Hemi came a far hotter version for the performance-bred VG Valiant Pacer, armed with either a tuberal or four-barrel carburetor. This engine could be ordered in several distinct tunes, each sharpening its bite. Yet Chrysler gave the true performance devotees a new two-door model, capable of housing an even more potent Hemi dubbed the Valiant Charger. This new two-door semi-fastback coupe was offered in several trims, with the RT being the crown jewel. In its base form, the Charger RT harnessed the horsepower Hemi from the V8 Pacer, but Chrysler wanted more. Entered the six-pack packages. Two performance arsenals designed to push the inline into legendary territory. The Mopar Hemi Six Pack wasn't thrown together on a whim. It was a meticulously crafted weapon. Prototype VG Pacers were shipped to Weber's factory in Bologna, where engineers perfected a triple DCE side-draft dual-throat carburetor setup. At its core lay the block, cast iron yet engineered with thin walls to shave weight without sacrificing strength. The crankshaft, supported by 7 main bearings, was forged steel built to survive the torsional fury of high-revving endurance. Pistons were hyperotokic alloys, and base models upgraded to forged units in the fearsome Ito withstand compression. The cylinder head was the star, a non-cross-flow design with spalled valves at forming semi-hemispherical combustion chambers that promoted swirl and complete burns. Intake valves measured in exhaust in massive foray, allowing gulps of air that VS envied. Push rods actuated the valves, but the geometry minimized losses, delivering razor-sharp response. The camshaft, a high lift and grind in the Eopan valves, wider and longer. While heavy-duty springs kept float at bay up to the RPM redline, then came the six-pack itself. 3 Weber Carbs, each a dual-throat side draft masterpiece mounted on a custom manifold. This wasn't showmanship, it was precision engineering. The center carb handled idle and cruise, with the outers kicking in under load for seamless progressive power delivery. Fuel and air were perfectly tuned, ratios held at Topher maximum torque. Exhaust headers upsized too, and fed a dual system that barked a unique raspy note deeper than any four-cylinder, more aggressive than many. KV's durability was paramount. Chrysler added a harmonic damper to quell crankshaft vibrations, shot-peened rods for fatigue resistance, and a windage tray to reduce oil foaming at high RPM. Later models even received electronic ignition for pinpoint accuracy. Weight savings were key. The engine tipped the scales at around lb, nearly less than a typical VEngines. The Charger, a decisive power-to-weight edge. This was no cosmetic upgrade. Every component was reworked. Compression pushed to Tolator in the efferged pistons, shot-peened rods, high-leafed cam, heavy-duty valve springs, and a harmonic damper to keep the 6-com at screaming revs. Exhaust headers were enlarged, and the dual-outlet system gave the six-pack its trademark voice. A savage, unrelenting bellow, unlike any other six-cylinder on the road. Development was relentless. Early prototypes suffered detonation in Australia's brutal heat, and the triple Weber required exact tuning to avoid flooding or lean spots. Chrysler refused to yield. Engineers handpicked the strongest blocks, strapped them to dynamometers that shook factory floors, and pushed the engines to their limits. By persistence paid off, the Epicause delivered horsepower and pound-feet of torque. In the U and further, toe compression, cold air intake, and a finely tuned ignition curve unleashed horsepower and pound-feet of torque. This wasn't an economy anymore. It was a torque monster with a flat, relentless surge from 2 RPM. Road tests were reveille. Wheels and modern motor clocked the E-Charger from 2 mph in seconds. 2 mph in seconds, with top speeds exceeding mph. Quarter-mile runs fell into the mids at mph, numbers that rivaled Detroit's Cub in small block VEngines. Yet the Hemi excelled in efficiency. The hemispherical chambers burned clean, yielding 2 m per gallon on the highway, while Versus guzzled to one tester remarked, "It pulls like a VF Romidal." revs like a sports car, and sips like an economy sedan. Legends grew quickly. A prototype E-Charger outran a police Falcon on a Melbourne highway. Prompting the cop to admit, "I thought it was a Vontal. I popped the hood." Mechanics nicknamed it the Sleeper for its deceptive growl, a quiet menace until unleashed. For Borst, Chrysler homologated the U with road cars, ensuring racing eligibility. Its torque, peaking at RPM, made it ideal for the mountains punishing climbs where heavier Vs bogged down. The goal was audacious. Conquer Mount Panorama, the mile crucible of New South Wales. Ford and Holden's Versas had long dominated its straights. But Chrysler's lighter Chargers exploited the Hemi's efficiency and torque through the twists. The six-pack wasn't just fast, it was smart, agile, and unbreakable. Whispers of excitement spread through Chrysler, an engineer recalled. "We knew we had something special." The boys laughed at our little six until they saw the dyno sheets. Even Sir Sterling Moss, roped in for VG Pacer ads, praised the Hemi's smooth, turbine-like power. On test tracks, rivals smelled blood. Ford's GTHO phase with its Cleveland VOS did horsepower, but the Charger's lighter weight leveled the field. Holden's V10s were torque-eye, but the Hemi's breathing efficiency shone in endurance. Chrysler had built a monster. Not just fast, but smart, efficient, and unbreakable. The stage was set for Borst's reckoning, the Borst's fury, and the six-pack's triumph. Borst, the air thick with fuel fumes and anticipation, fans pressed against the barriers of Mount Panorama. The hardy Ferodo Australia's grueling endurance race pitched production-based touring cars into a mile war. Ford's phased GTHO Falcons with pumping-out horsepower were favorites. Holden's LC Tana GTR XUs, their cubic and S-tuned to horsepower, promised speed and agility. But Chrysler had unleashed something different. The valiant Charger Arteet's Hemi Six-Pack growling horsepower, lighter, faster, and ravenous. The grid shivered as engines roared to life. Alan Moffat's Falcon led early, but Leo Gaiagan's E-Charger surged, the triple Weber singing as it climbed skyline. The Hemi's torque hurled it up the mountain, catching Vs on the straights. By lap Gojagan was lapping slower cars. The Charger's fast handling excelling through the S's. Normichi's sister car battled Moffat wheel-to-wheel. It's the Inline Six pulling hard out of the corners. The race descended into chaos. Tire blowouts, oil spills, and engine failures claimed versus left and right, but the Hemi kept going. Its 7-bearing crank handled the stress. The triple carbs delivered fuel with surgical precision for laps. Gio Gigan crossed the line third, Beachy fourth. Proof that the six-pack had earned its stripes. Moffat took the win, but Chrysler dominated headlines. 6 beats 8. Screamed newspapers. Fans chanted Hemi Hemi. As Chargers pitted, mechanics swapping tires in record time raised the stakes. It debuted horsepower ready to unleash chaos. Borst's field was stacked. Ford phase prototypes scrapped amid the supercar scare and Holden Versas. Kevin Bartlett piloted an edgeling Colin Bonds to Mount Panorama, tested every skill. Connor Strait saw speeds over MPH, yet the Hemi's efficiency meant fewer fuel stops. The hemispherical chambers burned clean, yielding 2 m per gallon on the highway, while Versas guzzled to one tester remarked, "It pulls like a VF Romidal, revs like a sports car, and sips like an economy sedan." Legends grew quickly. A prototype E-Charger outran a police Falcon on a Melbourne highway. Prompting the cop to admit, "I thought it was a Vontal. I popped the hood." Mechanics nicknamed it the Sleeper for its deceptive growl, a quiet menace until unleashed. For Borst, Chrysler homologated the U with road cars, ensuring racing eligibility. Its torque, peaking at RPM, made it ideal for the mountains punishing climbs where heavier Vs bogged down. The goal was audacious. Conquer Mount Panorama, the mile crucible of New South Wales. Ford and Holden's Versas had long dominated its straights. But Chrysler's lighter Chargers exploited the Hemi's efficiency and torque through the twists. The six-pack wasn't just fast, it was smart, agile, and unbreakable. Whispers of excitement spread through Chrysler, an engineer recalled. "We knew we had something special." The boys laughed at our little six until they saw the dyno sheets. Even Sir Sterling Moss, roped in for VG Pacer ads, praised the Hemi's smooth, turbine-like power. On test tracks, rivals smelled blood. Ford's GTHO phase with its Cleveland VOS did horsepower, but the Charger's lighter weight leveled the field. Holden's V10s were torque-eye, but the Hemi's breathing efficiency shone in endurance. Chrysler had built a monster. Not just fast, but smart, efficient, and unbreakable. The stage was set for Borst's reckoning, the Borst's fury, and the six-pack's triumph. Borst, the air thick with fuel fumes and anticipation, fans pressed against the barriers of Mount Panorama. The hardy Ferodo Australia's grueling endurance race pitched production-based touring cars into a mile war. Ford's phased GTHO Falcons with pumping-out horsepower were favorites. Holden's LC Tana GTRXUs, their cubic and S, tuned to horsepower, promised speed and agility. But Chrysler had unleashed something different. The valiant Charger Attit's Hemi Six Pack growling horsepower, lighter, faster, and ravenous.
Ow.
The grid shivered as engines roared to life. Alan Moffat's Falcon led early, but Leo Gaiagan's E-Charger surged, the triple Webers singing as it climbed skyline. The Hemi's torque hurled it up the mountain, catching V's on the straights. By-lap Gagarin was lapping slower cars. E-Chargers, fast-handling, excelling through the S's. Normichi's sister car battled Moffat wheel-to-wheel. It's the Inline Six pulling hard out of the corners. The race descended into chaos. Tire blowouts, oil spills, and engine failures claimed versus left and right, but the Hemi kept going. Its 7-bearing crank handled the stress. The triple carbs delivered fuel with surgical precision for laps. Guillaume Gigan crossed the line third, Beachy fourth. Proof that the six-pack had earned its stripes. Moffitt took the win, but Chrysler dominated headlines. 6 beats 8. Screamed newspapers. Fans chanted, Hemi, Hemi. As Chargers pitted, mechanics swapping tires in record time raised the stakes. The debuted horsepower, ready to unleash chaos. Borst's field was stacked. Ford phase prototypes scrapped amid the supercar scare, and Holden versus. Kevin Bartlett piloted an edgeling Colin Bond's Tana. Mount Panorama tested every skill. Connor Strait saw speeds over MPH, yet the Hemi's efficiency meant fewer fuel stops. Bartlett led mid-race, the triple carbs delivering seamless power through Hell Corner. A suspension fault dropped him, but Doug Chibvasi's surged to second, humiliating heavier rivals with relentless torque. Stories from the pits became legend. Moffitt quipped that damn six sounds like a chainsaw, but it won't quit. Bikey later said, the torque was endless. You'd exit a corner, and it just pulled. No waiting for revs. The E's lighter weight, pound versus the Falcons, gave superior braking and cornering, turning Both's S twists into advantages. By the race's end, the crowd erupted. The six-pack had symbolically lapped the field, if not always in position. But trouble was coming. The suppression game. Bathurst S victories should have made the Hemi six-pack famous around the world, bringing Australian muscle to a global stage. Instead, it sparked a chain of events that buried the engine in obscurity. The turning point was Australia's supercar scare, a media storm fueled by cars like Ford's GTH phase, a Veminster, and Chrysler's E. Newspapers screamed headlines. Killer cars on our roads, politicians railed against youth fatalities, and insurance companies hiked premiums on high-performance models, putting E's out of reach for most buyers. But the scare hid deeper forces. Chrysler Australia, part of Detroit's Chrysler Corporation, faced pressure from above. American executives saw the Hemi as a threat to their VO dominance. Why promote a six-cylinder that could beat and vest? Leaked memos from Detroit urged alignment with Global Strategy's code for focusing on emissions-friendly versus during the U.S. oil crisis. Even though the ES emissions were clean for its time, new Australian rules modeled on California made things tricky. CAMs helped enforce fairness in racing. Powered two-weight rules were changed, putting lighter sixes like the Charger at a disadvantage. Homologation required road cars for racing eligibility. Chrysler met it, but rivals pushed for stricter rules. Rumors in the paddock suggested Ford and Holden lobbied officials. That six-pack is too good. It unbalances the field. By the UA's gone, replaced by detuned E's with two-barrel carbs. Production stopped at around 2 units. The wildest six-packs disappearing almost overnight, corporate jealousy ran deep. Chrysler Detroit, struggling with U.S. sales, couldn't let an Aussie success outshine their Hemis. As one insider told Haggerty Media, the UA's quicker than our darts in some tests. Embarrassing. Big Oil had a stake too. An efficient six meant less fuel sold. Insurance hikes were no accident. Lobbying insured premiums for muscle cars soared, keeping them out of young drivers' hands. The betrayal hit engineers hardest. Paul Martin, a Chrysler historian, recalled, Sir Sterling Moss tested the VG Pacer prototypes. He loved the Hemi's smoothness, but politics killed the momentum. Urban legends grew. Secret eprotype with quad carbs was tested in private, then scrapped before BA to avoid attention. By Charger production ended. The full Hemi vanished and as Chrysler Australia closed amid financial troubles. This wasn't failure, it was sabotage. Regulations, corporate egos, and media panic erased a revolution. Australia's greatest muscle secret was silence to protect VSALs and global uniformity. Ghosts of the Hemi time moves on, but the Hemi pack refuses to fade. In vintage races like the Borst Heritage Revival, restored E-Charger's thunder around Mount Panorama. On a race. Their triple Webers still screaming defiance. Modern tuners at shops like Mirobito Performance push them to horsepower naturally aspirated with FE swaps and stroker kits, showing the Ingenious endless potential. Collector values soar. Pristine E's sell for over Australian dollars. Treasured as Australia's ultimate muscle icons, the legacy goes beyond nostalgia. The Hemi S semi-hemispherical design foreshadowed modern Turbo S like BMW's soar Mercedes M-proof that inline S can match versus in power and efficiency. Companies like Hemi Performance even offer crate engines, keeping the roar alive in hot rods and restorations. As Stacey Cronk wrote for Haggerty, the UAA's the quickest car built in Australia for years, quicker than the GTHO Falcon. But why did Chrysler bury the development documents only to reveal them decades later? Was there a secret phase, a prototype with hotter cams and quad carbs tested in private and scrapped to avoid regulations? Old-timers whisper of a locked crate in a Melbourne warehouse. Holding the last factory E-block untouched, its potential frozen in time. It's the truth waiting inside that crate, ready for a new generation to unleash it. Enthusiasts debate whether Detroit deliberately starved Chrysler Australia of funds to kill the Hemi threat.